The black widow's dress stood out starkly against the sea of dark suits in the town hall meeting. Sarah Parker stood in the center of the room, shoulders squared, facing 12 frowning council members. "We decided, ma'am. A woman without a husband has no right to continue operating that land." Mayor Thomas Wilson announced coldly, drawing snickers from several men. 6 months had passed since Matthew's accident at the quarry. 6 months of empty rooms and hollow prayers. 6 months of learning to be alone on a ranch too large for a single pair of hands. Sarah clutched her husband's pocket watch, its gold surface worn smooth from years of his touch. "The deed is in my name, Mayor Wilson," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her fingers. Matthew made sure of that before he died. The mayor exchanged glances with banker Frank Collins, a subtle communication that didn't escape Sarah's notice. "The bank has concerns about your loan payments, Mrs. Parker. A woman alone can't possibly manage 60 acres, especially with the drought." "I've never missed a payment," Sarah countered, feeling the eyes of the townsfolk burning into her back. "Not yet." Wilson smiled thinly. "But winter's coming, and we all know how the creek runs dry by October." The truth hung heavy in the air. Without water, the cattle wouldn't survive. Without cattle, the ranch would fail. Without the ranch, Sarah would have nothing. As the meeting adjourned, Mrs. Henderson, the seamstress, squeezed Sarah's arm. "Dear, you should consider Samuel Peterson's offer. He's been widowed 3 years now, needs a mother for his children." Sarah pulled away gently. "Thank you for your concern." Outside, the merciless summer sun beat down on Red Hollow. The small trading post had grown into a proper town over the past decade. Women averted their eyes as Sarah passed, as if widowhood might be contagious. Men tipped their hats with exaggerated courtesy that felt more like mockery. The ride back to the Parker Ranch was long and dusty. The land stretched out, beautiful and brutal in its vastness. Golden grass bending under the wind, distant mesas rising like ancient guardians. This land had been Matthew's dream, then hers. Now it felt like her only purpose. The well stood like a sentinel near the barn, its wooden frame weathered by sun and wind. Sarah worked the pump handle, muscles aching from the morning's labor. The water came reluctantly, a trickle rather than a stream. She filled her bucket halfway, all she dared take, and silently calculated how long it would last. That evening, as shadows stretched across the yard, Sarah sat on her porch, mending a torn shirt. The sunset painted the sky in impossible colors, just as it had the day Matthew proposed, the day they moved to the ranch, the day they buried him under the old oak tree. Beauty and pain always intertwined. A coyote called in the distance. Sarah reached for the rifle leaning against the wall, a habit more than a real intention. She had never fired it. Matthew had tried to teach her, but she'd always made excuses. Now there were no more excuses. Only tomorrow and the water that might not come. The crack of a branch woke Sarah before dawn. She lay perfectly still, listening to the darkness. Another sound, a low moan, barely audible over the wind. Not an animal, a person, heart hammering. She took the rifle and moved silently to the window. In the pale moonlight, she saw a dark shape crumpled near the well. A man lying motionless on his side. Common sense told her to bar the doors and wait for morning. Instead, Sarah lit a lantern and stepped outside, rifle awkwardly gripped in one hand. As she approached, she saw the blood first, dark patches staining the dirt. Then the details came into focus. Long black hair, buckskin clothing, a necklace of beads and feathers. An Apache. Her breath caught. Stories from church pews and saloon corners rushed back. Tales of raids and scalping, of settlers found dead in burned-out homesteads. Red Hollow had been peaceful for years, but old fears ran deep. The man's chest rose and fell with labored breaths. A deep wound sliced across his shoulder, revealing bone. His face, angular and weathered, showed pain even in unconsciousness. Sarah took a step back, then another. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. No one would come if she called for help. No one would blame her for leaving an Apache to die. She returned to the house, set down the rifle, and stood in the kitchen, hands pressed against the rough wooden table. After a long moment, She filled a cup with precious water from her bucket and returned to the wounded man. Kneeling beside him, she lifted his head gently. "Here," she whispered, though she doubted he could hear. His eyes snapped open, dark, fierce, alert despite his condition. For a breathless moment, they stared at each other. Then slowly, he parted his lips and drank. When the cup was empty, he nodded once, a gesture so dignified it made her throat tighten. Sarah retreated to the house, barred the door, and didn't sleep. Morning arrived with thunder, not from the sky, but from the earth. Sarah rushed to the window and froze at the sight. Dozens of Apache warriors approached on horseback, moving in perfect formation across the golden plain. They surrounded the ranch in silence, faces painted, feathers trailing in the wind. No shouts, no weapons raised. But their presence was unmistakable, a living wall of potential violence. From among them rode the wounded man, sitting tall despite his bandaged shoulder. He dismounted slowly, his movements careful but deliberate. Sarah stepped onto the porch, hands trembling at her sides. The wounded warrior approached her, stopped a respectful distance away, and spoke a single word: water. Then he turned to his people and spoke at length in Apache. Whatever he said changed everything. The warriors lowered their stance, and most began to retreat, melting back in the landscape as silently as they had appeared. But one remained. The wounded man walked past Sarah toward the barn and settled in its shade, closing his eyes as if he belonged there. "You shouldn't be here," Sarah said after gathering her courage. "The town will come looking." He opened his eyes. "You gave water. I protect." "I gave water, not shelter," she insisted. "You saved." "I protect," he repeated simply, "until you are safe." By noon, the ranch was quiet again, with only hoofprints in the dust as evidence of the morning's visitors. The Apache warrior, who still hadn't offered his name, remained near the barn, watching the horizon with the alertness of a hawk. He didn't ask for food, didn't demand anything, but when Sarah returned from tending cattle, she found the broken fence post mended and firewood stacked neatly by the door. That night, she set 2 plates on the porch table and watched as he nodded in acknowledgement, but waited for her to take the first bite before eating. Through the window, she saw him sitting under the stars, keeping watch. Not a guest, not an intruder, but something else entirely. A guardian born of a single act of mercy. 3 days passed. The Apache warrior, who finally introduced himself as Flying Eagle, became a shadow on the ranch, always working, always watching. His wound healed quickly under his own care, his movements becoming more fluid each day. Sarah found herself growing accustomed to his presence. The silent nod when they passed each other, the small tasks completed before she could mention them, the way safety seemed to settle around property, like an invisible fence. On the 4th day, she rode into Red Hollow for supplies. The general store fell silent as she entered, conversations dying mid-sentence. Mrs. Thompson clutched her shopping basket tighter. Mr. Peterson stepped away from the counter. Sheriff Mills approached, hat in hand. "Mrs. Parker, we need to talk." She continued selecting items from the shelves. "About what, Sheriff?" "People are saying you've got an Apache living on your property." A tin of coffee slipped from Sarah's hand, clattering loudly in the silence. She picked it up slowly. "Is that against the law?" "It's against common sense," interrupted a voice from the doorway. Mayor Wilson stood there, thumbs hooked in his vest pockets. After all the trouble with the Apache over the years, raids, livestock theft, harboring one is practically treason. Sarah faced him squarely. He was injured. I helped him. His people left peacefully. "Not all of them," the mayor said pointedly. "One savage still remains, doesn't he?" The whispers started immediately. Mrs. Henderson crossed herself. Someone muttered, "Shameful." "He's done nothing wrong," Sarah said, her voice rising despite her efforts to remain calm. The mayor stepped closer. "They say he's living in your barn. They say you feed him at your table." His voice dropped to a stage whisper. "What would your poor husband think, Mrs. Parker?" Sarah's cheeks burned. "My husband would recognize decency when he saw it." Sheriff Mills cleared his throat. "Sarah, we're concerned for your safety. These people can't be trusted. Let me send some men to escort him off your property." "That won't be necessary," she replied coldly, placing coins on the counter for her purchases. "Think about your reputation," Mrs. Henderson pleaded. "A woman alone with a—" "Good day," Sarah cut her off, gathering her supplies and walking out with her back rigid and her eyes forward, ignoring the stares that followed her. That night, 3 riders approached the ranch under cover darkness. Sarah woke to the sound of breaking glass and rushed to the window in time to see flames lighting up the chicken coop. 3 masked men stood in the yard, one holding a torch. "Time to leave, Indian lover," a voice shouted. "This is just a warning." Before Sarah could react, a shadow moved swiftly across the yard. Flying Eagle tackled the torchbearer, extinguishing the flame in the dirt. The other men lunged at him, but they were no match for his speed and precision. Within moments, all 3 lay groaning on the ground. Flying Eagle stood over them, knife in hand, but made no move to cause further harm. "Go," he said simply. The men scrambled to their horses and galloped away. Flying Eagle turned to Sarah, who stood on the porch clutching her nightgown at the throat. "They will return," he said, "with more men." She nodded, her entire body trembling. "Why are you still here? This isn't your fight." He looked at the well, then back at her. "My people believe that water given freely creates a bond stronger than blood. You gave water to enemy. Now enemy becomes protector. I'm not worth dying for," she whispered. Flying Eagle's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. Every life worth protecting, especially one that protects others. Sarah realized with sudden clarity that it wasn't just gratitude that kept him there, it was respect. A language they both understood in a world that had taken so much from each of them. A week after the attack, Sarah found herself sorting through Matthew's old trunk. She hadn't touched his belongings since the funeral, but something about Flying Eagle's presence had given her the strength to face this final task. Beneath Matthew's Sunday clothes and leather-bound Bible, she found a sealed envelope addressed to Mayor Wilson. Curiosity overcoming her hesitation, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. Her hand began to shake as she read. "Mayor Wilson, as discussed, I agree to sell the ranch a proposed amount once the drought forces foreclosure. Sarah need never know about our arrangement. The deed transferred to your name can proceed as soon as the bank calls in a loan. She'll have no choice but to move to her sisters in Boston, exactly where a woman belongs. Matthew Parker." The letter was dated 3 weeks before Matthew's death. Sarah sat motionless on the floor, the paper crumpling in her grip. The room seemed to tilt around her. Matthew hadn't loved the ranch as he'd claimed. He hadn't considered it her home, her future. He had planned to sell it behind her back, to the very man now trying to drive her away. Flying Eagle found her there, still clutching the letter. Without a word, he sat beside her on the floor. She handed him the paper, and he studied it carefully, his expression unreadable. "He betrayed me," she finally whispered. "My husband, the mayor, all of them." Flying Eagle returned the letter. "This paper," he said, tapping it with one finger, "is power." Sarah looked up, tears drying on her cheeks as understanding dawned. "Evidence," she breathed. "Proof of their conspiracy." He nodded. "In my tribe, when a man breaks trust, he must face the council of elders. Your town has elders too." "The county judge," Sarah said, mind racing. "He oversees all land disputes. If I show him this—" "The snake will show its fangs when cornered," Flying Eagle warned. "More dangerous then." Sarah folded the letter carefully, a new resolve hardening inside her. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said, and realized it was true. Fear had been her companion for too long. Fear of being alone, of failing, of the future. But now she understood that some betrayals were also liberations. "Tomorrow," she said, standing up straight, "we ride to town." The county courthouse stood imposing and white against the clear blue sky. Sarah, dressed in her best blue dress instead of widow's black, walked up the steps with her head high. Flying Eagle had insisted on accompanying her, but agreed to wait outside with the horses, his presence already causing ripples of whispers among the townspeople. Judge Carlton, a stern man with silver hair and piercing eyes, Listen without interruption as Sarah presented Matthew's letter and explained the situation. Mayor Wilson, summoned to the judge's chambers, grew increasingly pale as she spoke. "This is absurd," Wilson sputtered when she finished. "The letter is obviously forged. And even if it weren't, it proves nothing legally binding." On the contrary, Judge Carlton said, adjusting his spectacles, "It establishes a pattern of deception and possible conspiracy to defraud Mrs. Parker her property." He turned to Sarah. "The deed is solely in your name?" "Yes, Your Honor. Matthew transferred it before his death." "Then the matter is clear. The property belongs to Mrs. Parker. Any attempts to coerce her into selling or abandoning it are not only unethical, but potentially criminal." As they exited the courthouse, Wilson hissed, "This isn't over. No decent person will support you after they learn what you've done." The threat hung in the air as he stormed away. But Sarah felt only a calm certainty as she descended the steps to where Flying Eagle waited. News traveled fast. By evening, Sarah found a basket of fresh eggs on her porch, left anonymously. The next day, the blacksmith rode out to repair her wagon wheel, refusing payment. Small gestures, but significant. 1 month later, Wilson left town under a cloud of financial scandal, his other dealings having come under scrutiny. The ranch flourished under Sarah's care. Flying Eagle stayed, not as a guest but as a partner, his knowledge of the land bringing new life to the property. When his family came to visit, bringing gifts and songs, the ranch became a place where two worlds met in peace. Standing by the well where it all began, Sarah sometimes thought about how a single cup of water had changed everything. She had given water to a stranger when convention demanded fear. He had given protection when the world expected violence. Together, they had created something neither could have built alone, a bridge between worlds, stronger than prejudice, deeper than difference. Sometimes the greatest courage isn't found in grand battles, but in simple act of kindness when all logic argues against it. And sometimes, the most meaningful connections form precisely where the world tries hardest to build walls. Have you ever offered kindness to someone different from yourself, despite what others might think, or received help from an unexpected source? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire others to reach across divides with compassion rather than fear. If this tale of courage and unexpected friendship touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more stories of remarkable women who defied expectations and found strength in the most unexpected places. Remember, sometimes the smallest gestures, like sharing this video, can create ripples of change far beyond what we imagine.